All right, everybody. Apologize for the delay. Nothing major took place, just had to work some things around. But I am here with a very special guest. I was telling Will before we went live how much I respect him and love Earshot. I've been listening to Earshot probably as long as majority of the fan base has. It's 20 plus years in, and always been a real big fan. My introduction was Headstrong from the Queen of the Damned soundtrack, is where I was introduced. And I'm like,
Mhm.
man, this is some really sick sounded stuff. Obviously, people throw in the Tool thing, and I kind of thought that a little bit, but I have some insight on that for why I think you guys are actually pretty separate from Tool, and I'll get into what I mean later on. But I am thrilled to have you on, Will. Again, been a big fan for many years, and I'm excited to pick your brain about the new album, the new song, and kind of the in betweens between the years, working up to making this record. So thank you.
Right on. Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for sticking with us throughout the years.
Yeah.
It's funny, oftentimes we get people that, that'll say to me, they'll say, "Will, dude, I fucking grew up listening to you guys, man. You guys are awesome." To which I say, "So did we." We it's been a fun ride so far, and
Hmm.
this new record has kind of made it fun again, and took a little while, but here we are.
Yeah. And I'd like to say that we're all here for it. I think in some ways, the fans obviously not quite the same as you, and obviously there's been some new lineup changes throughout the years and stuff, and you got some really good people behind you right now. Aaron Fink in particular, I love that guy. He's a phenomenal guitar, so I'm excited that he's in the ranks now. But I'm just glad to see you come out the other side of all the things you're working, through, both with Earshot, keeping that on the ground in whatever kind of state through the years. It can be a lot of work. I totally know that. Not that I've done it myself, but I got the idea how hard the work can be keeping something on the rails, so to speak. But for people that don't really know who you are and who Earshot is, I wanted to just do a brief little kind of trip down memory lane with Earshot. Basically, just kind of saying where it started with Earshot. You could outline the first two records if you want in any kind of way you want, so people have a little bit of context with Earshot and the history. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
Well, we started here in Los Angeles. We got a record deal pretty quick, I'd say, after a handful of shows.
Hmm.
We signed to Warner Brothers. We put out our first record called Letting Go, which had our first single, Getaway, which was a huge, massive success for us at the time. It was, man, that song, literally changed our lives in the beginning. We were a local band, and we had a little bit of a fan base, but nothing like what ended up becoming from that one song. And it was just a really cool experience to kind of watch it grow and be along for that ride. We also had Headstrong off that record, which ended up in what many uh, claim to believe is one of the best, movie soundtracks, up there with The Crow, which I love The Crow
I
soundtrack.
echo that.
That's
Hmm.
that's one of my all-time favorite, along with singles. The movie soundtrack to that was really great too. So, to be in that echelon, with those great soundtracks with that had so many great bands on them, it's a real honor and humbling as well.
Yeah.
Uh, we had a second single off our first record, um, called Not Afraid, which was really our first music video that we shot, our first real one. We had one for Getaway, but that was more of like a live video that the
Right.
label
Yeah.
hired some people to come out and shoot. So technically it wasn't like a real video, but Not Afraid was our first video, and that song did really, really great for us, and that just kept the train rolling for us. And between those three songs, really set up what was to become our next record called Two.
Hmm.
And off of that record came what some call our breakout single. And we thought Getaway really sort of unlocked some things for us. Wait really just kind of blew the doors wide
Yeah.
open. Um, it ended up on one of my all-time favorite video games. And I don't play a lot of video games, but when I do, Madden's one of them. It's one of the three that I think I play.
Yeah.
Um, so that was really cool to be a part of that. And not only were we on that soundtrack, we were like the lead artist and song for that. And we had actually two versions of it. We have our version, and then when you beat the game, the Madden all Madden team, then it kicks in a sort of a secret track that was remixed by the DOC from
Okay.
NWA, which I was a huge NWA fan growing up. So that was like wow, like double whammy, Madden and the DOC. Um, we also had a single off that record, Someone, and we kind of rode that, off into the sunset, and then we took a little bit of a break. We ended up switching record labels a couple
Yeah.
years later and ended up on Universal Indigoot, which was a label that my then manager had started. So we partnered up on that record, and that was called The Silver Lining.
Yes.
And that record, the first single off that record was Misunderstood. And there was some other songs on there too, but it was a record that was cut short. We had some differences with our label, which led to the promotion and the touring of that record sort of cut short. I think we ended up going out and doing about a year or so worth of touring after that. I think we that record came out in sometime in 2008 or 9 maybe, and I think we toured until 2010 or 11 on and off. And then once we stopped touring, that's when I kind of sort of came home and just needed to take a breath. And I came back
Right.
and we had these sort of scraps, these leftover tracks that we had kind of finished but hadn't really finished. And I had just got a bunch of new studio gear, so I was anxious to utilize it. So I went ahead
Yeah.
and I finished up these handful of songs that we had laying around that we never released, and we put that out as the Aftermath, which was a pretty eclectic record to say the least.
I would agree.
And we didn't do any touring behind that, and then that's when we took the long hiatus.
The
We
long
took
sleep.
a long cold sleep.
Yeah.
I did a lot of stuff between that. I was working on music with other people. Um, Oddly enough, it was funny, as you mentioned, we got the comparison to Tool a lot.
Hmm.
And one of the people that uh we ended up connecting somehow, um through, I think, maybe Facebook or something. I can't remember, but Paul Demore, who was the original bass player
Yeah.
for
Original
Tool,
basis. Yeah.
he contacted me. I didn't know who he was at first because I didn't know who was talking to me, and it was just somebody that asked if I was interested and open to working on some other projects, and I said sure. And I always say that because always am interested to hear other things that might inspire me, or if I can help give direction in any way. And so I got these demos and I thought to myself, wow, these really sound familiar. And then it turned out that that's who it was. Great guy.
Yes.
We wrote a few songs together. None of them came out, and they probably won't come out. Um, So I did stuff like that, different projects. I did some stuff with George Lynch from Dokken, who was, guitar player that when I was a aspiring guitar player, he was one of the people that I, you know, tried to embody in my playing and learn from. So that was really cool to get to do a couple of records with him. We put out, or he put out a record. Kill All Control, I believe, is the name of the record that we wrote. And I didn't write all of the songs. We ended up um, having some disagreements about halfway through the record, so somebody else finished it. But I'm on half that record, and then right before the pandemic, he contacted me, or actually it was right at the start of the pandemic. He contacted me to see if I was interested in working with him and Jeff Pilson in doing an album of cover songs. And that came out really cool. That was called Heavy Hitters.
Oh wow.
And on that record, I appear, I think, on all but one or two songs of that one. But there's some great ones on there that I just love. So between those projects, I also got into coaching. I started working with artists and bands in different capacities. I did some tour managing. I tour managed Peter Murphy from Bauhaus. I tour
Wow. Yeah.
managed UFO. I tour managed the Misfits for a couple of years. And so I did a lot of in between stuff that just kind of more or less some music related stuff, but a lot of stuff that wasn't. And that was kind of the break that I was kind of wanting to have then. And then up until 2017 or 18, there was a promoter in Vegas that just was incessantly emailing me about, can we book you guys? You're available. And I kept telling them, we're not active right now. I'm sorry. And he just would keep emailing. And I had a buddy of mine, Andy, and a friend of mine, Mikey, uh, who said, hey, if you want to do it, one was a drummer and one was a guitar player. If you want to do it, let's do it. We'll get a bass player and a guitar player. And I went, eh. So I emailed that promoter back about a year later. He'd been working on me for about a year. And I said, all right, here we go. Let's do this. And we did that show. And shortly thereafter is when um, Aaron contacted me just to say hello. We met back in 2004 uh, when Breaking Benjamin and Earshot were out doing some shows and some
Right.
festivals. And so we stayed in touch, periodically. And it just coincidentally lined up that when we were putting this back together, he had texted me to say hello and ask me if I was interested in singing on a song that he was writing for his own solo project. And so I said, sure. And then after I sat and thought about it, I thought, well, I wonder if, we haven't gotten the second guitar player yet. I wonder if what he's up to, if he'd be interested. And so I called him and he didn't hesitate. He's like, yeah, I'm in, let's do it. And so ever since then, there's been a slight evolution of the band since then. We all live in different places.
Hmm.
I'm here in LA, Aaron's in Pennsylvania, um, our drummer's in Florida. So we're all kind of spread out. And, shortly after, a couple years after we started doing shows, um, we decided to make a record, and then the pandemic happened. So that put a kibosh on everything. And we put out,
With
a few
anything.
singles, put out a few
Yeah.
singles, and pandemic ended. We've done some more shows, since the pandemic ended. We did a short 3-week run just to kind of see if our heart was in it. And we went to Florida just before that and recorded drums and basic guitars for this new record. And then we took, or I should say, I took about 7 or 8 months, kind of working on some other personal stuff and working some stuff out. And that's when I
Mhm.
decided that if this record was ever going to get finished, I needed to call in a producer to finish it. So I called Bob Marlette, who a lot of fans, probably know him from the Saliva records and a bunch of
Absolutely.
other stuff. Seether.
Mhm.
Um, Went and met with him. Great guy. Love Bob. Bob's been a fan of mine for a long time, and he's absolutely great, great producer, great person. And then I also called, old friend Johnny K, who made, the record that all of our fans love, and both were great options. Johnny K was ready to go. He's like, let's do it. Let's get started. I'd sent him the songs and he was already digging into it. And so we went to Nashville, and that's about a year ago now. And we flew to Nashville to his studio and finished the record. And I just got back from finishing mixing, and now it's being mastered. And so here we are. It's been a little bit of a winding road, but that's, believe it or not, is the Reader's Digest version.
Well, there we go. That's fascinating to hear all that, and I think it's really vital to sometimes just kind of let things take a nice long break and kind of cool down, because there's you have those bands that try and just force their way through that, whether it's all the
Hmm.
members feeling a certain way or whether it's like one or two members feel a certain way, and that just ends up leaving things in a mess, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, you've always got to put yourself first, I think, and I think something that fans don't think about sometimes, because it's at the end of the day, you're a person just like I'm a person, right? You're a musician. People know your name, they know the band that you're associated with, but the person separate from that band, you have your own stuff that you work through, right? You have your ups, you
Yeah.
have your downs. So it's good that you took that time to kind of, if it was like, self-reflection, of course, and then just do another thing so your mind wasn't on earshot, and should I get back to this in case people just forget about it and they don't want anything to do with it anymore, you know. So when you did come back to it, your mind felt right about it. And what I want to point out, and the reason why I'm saying that, is when I listened to Where Were You, I think you sound really revitalized. Like the band itself just sounds really hungry, revitalized, and I hope I got this quote right. I might be adding my own little spin on it, but when you mentioned some interview at some point, can't remember exactly when it was, but it was recent enough that it's the earshot that people know, but
Mm.
it's also going to have some new spin to it. You're kind of ushering
Yeah.
in earshot for 2025, modern, time. And I think you're nailing that. That was a smart song to go with for the single, or just to represent earshot now. Um, and I'm bringing that up because I wonder if you didn't take that time to work on yourself and let things kind of naturally go the course that they did. I wonder if new earshot would have sounded as I don't want to say how do I put it. You know how you hear something sometimes it can sound maybe forced or kind of you know what I mean. This doesn't sound any bit about that. It sounds like you picked up right after Silver Lining or Aftermath, or even like two, or letting go. You could fit it in almost any kind of period of the band, and,
Mm.
and because I pick out so many different things with it. I ramble a lot, as you can tell, but I just want to say again that you made the right choice doing what you did, as far as taking the time with it. So, and I think that when we hear all 11 songs, 'cause if I remember right, there's 11 tracks,
Yep.
um, people are going to be blown away. That might be premature to say that, but my guts tell me that that's what I'm going to feel when I listen to it, because I do when I listen to the new song. Um, I'm going to
Yeah.
wrap this into what I want to talk about next, and it kind of has to do with at any point when earshot wasn't necessarily active, Did you question if you wanted to keep it going at some point? Did any of that go through your mind? Or did you think maybe I should put out a statement and say, hey, look, for now, I'm going to say that earshot's not a thing right now if it didn't feel right? Did that go through your mind at all?
Well, I definitely took the break because I just wasn't feeling passionate about it, like, and having fun with it
Right.
anymore. Uh, it was becoming, arduous and
Okay.
heavy. Um, as far as making an announcement, Peter Murphy, who I told you I worked with for a while, um, there was a there was a band that he was visiting with on the bus one day, and they hadn't been active in a while. And he said, "Yeah," he says to Peter, he says, I'm just gonna we should just put out a statement and tell everybody that we're hanging it up, we're done." And Peter said, "Well, why would you do that?" He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Who cares? If you're gonna Who wants to hear you're quitting? Nobody wants to hear that. Just quit. And then that way, if you change your mind, well, you haven't said you're quitting. You just coming back." So I agree with that philosophy. Now, that wasn't my line of thinking, at least consciously, but maybe somewhere in the back of my mind that was for me. Like, I'm not having fun. I'm going to put it down. I don't need to explain really
Right.
anything other than just not feeling it. And if I'm ready to make music again, then I will. And if I'm not, then I won't. It was pretty simple in my mind in that regard. Um, but yeah, I think, everything, I'm a believer in everything, eh, almost always, if not always, happens for a reason.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
would, how many records, could I have made if I'd, forced some things together, and would it be the same lineup today as it is? Would it be then? There's all kinds of variables and questions, and the good news is, luckily it's worked out now because I can't go back and change any of the
Right.
decisions that I made before anyway. So I'm happy where we're at. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. That's part of the um sort of hang up that you get into when you've been away for a while is, part of our challenge has been waking up our fan base that
Hmm.
kind of went to sleep because they thought, oh, well, they stopped and they went away and it's been a while. So they probably won't. So, you know, with to do that, you've gotta, be out there. You've got to be present. And more
Yep.
importantly, you got to make a great record. And we've made the great record part. That I'm 100% convinced of. The part that gets a little exhausting is just because, as social media is so noisy. It's
Very
tough
much.
breaking through. It's tough for even, labels trying to break new bands to get through.
Yep.
We're lucky in that we have a little bit of a platform to start from, but it's tough. It's really tough out there. But having great music that people want to listen to and connect with, that's half the battle.
Yes.
So, um, but you still got to get it out there, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah. And I'm happy we're at this point. I've, like many of us, waited, and we had those songs through the years leading up to the album announcement and the new song. You did an amazing cover of Alanis Morissette's Uninvited. You put the earshot spin on that, and frankly, I think that's one of the coolest covers I've heard from any band covering another band, and putting like a heavier spin to it. I kind of like when I don't want to call Alanis Morissette pop music, but just she was like alternative. She had rock and she had a lot of different mix, and sounds in her music. But I like when you take a song that's not traditionally heavy in the sense of guitars and the drums and bass and all that, and
Right.
kind of making it like that.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, granted, there was just little bit of activity between then and leading up to now. I think that what did take place and what did get put out was enough that people knew, okay, so they're not gone, and something's probably going to happen eventually, and so we're just going to stick around. So Earshot went to a little bit of a hibernation. We kind of did, but we were still kind of awake and looking and peeking around and paying attention to stuff. Personally, me, I dig on the internet all the time. Like I looked around for any kind of like life from Earshot a lot. I would like, man,
Mm.
I really want them to come back. I need to see them live, even if it's just like another record, because you don't stay young forever, and you kind of reach a point where you wonder, okay, can I sing these songs still? I wonder if that ran through your mind, or you get kind of sore moving up there on stage and stuff, and unless you're the Rolling Stones, of course, or whatever, those guys are still out there kicking ass. But um, I hear what you're saying. It's Peter Murphy had a point. If you're gonna quit, just do it, and then
Yeah.
when you come back and you haven't made an announcement, it's like, oh, hey, look, they're back. Because how many bands could I name that have said, okay, this is a farewell tour? I mean, Kiss. Oh, guys, farewell, we're going. They're back again. They just announced that they're coming back again. It's like, well, I thought you guys were done. But
Yeah.
yeah. No, so I want to get myself back on course and just bring up the album again that you're working on and kind of get into a little bit more of the headspace that you've had throughout the course of writing it, and the other guys that have been in the band with you writing it with you, kind of just overall a look into how it's felt actually making a full length again, versus with Silver Lining and Two and Letting Go, because times have changed. Album format. People question how viable an album format is. People's attention spans and just how the industry seems to shift a lot. If singles are the way to go, if EPs are the way to go, so I just kind of want to hear the ins and outs of this record so far, just more about that and kind of get into your head a little bit about some of the stuff you're touching on with it, if you could speak about any of it.
Well, there's there's a lot of really interesting songs on this record. We we chose Where Were You because we felt it had a renewed sense of energy and it was familiar sounding to people that have been following us, over the years. And but like I said, but still had a new energy to it. Um, we admittedly around the silver lining, we started to get a little experimental and moved away a bit from our first two records. Um, Where Were You sort of represents that earlier sound that we had from Letting Go and Two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's a couple of more songs on there I would say that have that familiarity. But then there's a whole slew of songs that um they're familiar but very interesting. Like you can hear there's definitely something new that's happened that's kind of crept into the recipe, of what we do. And I think that happens anytime, when you're working with different musicians, you're going to get different thing. It's like taking different ingredients. When you mix an egg and flour, you get one thing, and if you mix flour and water, you get something else, right? You just get different things. So obviously, this lineup of musicians had a lot to do with that. I think for me, aside from the very first record, Letting Go, two, I wrote a lot of not all of it, but a good chunk of the music I wrote on that record. Silver Lining, same. And on this record, I had Aaron write to write with and sort of go back and forth with which I hadn't really had that since the first record when our original bass player, who I started the band with, he was a lot like that. Like he had a lot of vision and was very creative and we would go back and forth. Well, I think it should go this way. Well, I think it should go that way. Well, what about this way? And then we'd raggle back and forth and we'd end up somewhere that was neither, but somewhere neither one of us. And it was usually a combination of what we were both trying to get that took us there. And so the same things kind of happened here with Aaron and I. And I think that is what makes this interesting. So there's on top of that, there's familiarity there with, people that have been listening to Earshot over the years and people that were listening to old school Breaking Benjamin,
Hmm.
so it's that same kind of energy, that we were able to sort of capture in a bottle and mixed with Johnny K and our bass player John and Mikey. I mean, we were able to really create something at the end of the day when we got back from recording, both from Florida and when we got back from recording with Johnny K. We literally all said to each other after we took a few days to kind of take it all in, came with the same feeling of wow, like whether anybody likes it as much as we do remains to be seen, but we really feel like this is like there's nobody's nobody's made a record like the one that we just made. And I'm not saying that we've invented heavy rock music, but I'm talking about the way that we're doing it, how we're mixing it up, you know. And it's not extreme to like Sleep Token or something, whom I love. It's not that crazy of a mix up, but it's hard to explain. It's a very I guess for lack of a better term, it's a very um personal record. Like you feel like it almost feels like you're sitting in this space with us and listen, with the music and with the lyrics, and it just feels like you're immersed in the emotion that's behind it all. You could feel all of that. And you can hear all the details and the parts, and it's not overproduced either. But it's not underproduced. It's just a really natural record, but sounds just really big,
Hmm.
for lack of a better term. So I think I think people will recognize it as much for that. Um, we're it's definitely not background music. It's definitely something that's going, that just kind of grabs you and you go, huh, and then you end up humming it in your head, you know, hours later, and you're going, there's that song. That's one song. I mean, there's so many songs that do that to you. We've been sort of focus grouping it with some people, that we know that we trust and that are tough critics of ours. And we've played a few tracks for some of our radio friends, to give us honest feedback. And same thing, like, man, like 2 days later, I'm still humming. Like I found myself humming that chorus or that melody in the verse. You know what I mean? So it just has
Yeah.
that touch. It wasn't done by design that way. This record, at least lyrically for me, like this is probably one of the most stream of thought records that I've made. Typically, I'm going, back and forth, and I did a little bit of that in some places, but by and large, I mean, I was just writing what the music was stirring up in me, and that's what I ended up going with more often than not.
I mean that's really great. I just want to say important. The most important thing for me to hear when I listen to a song or a complete record from front to back is when I'm listening and I know and I can tell that the band loves the record. You hear the care and you hear the passion just pounding through those speakers against your eardrum. And I've always gotten that with Earshot. I've always thought that you wrote from a really personal place, but you also kind of leave it to where people can kind of understand in a way the train of thought you're having there, or put their own kind of relation to the lyrics and the feeling of that the music evokes in them. You
Mhm.
know, when I sit down and listen to a song like "Someone," when I first heard that song when two came out, I took a lot of time to find love in my life, right? And when I heard that song, I just replay it over and over again. Like I feel like this too. What he's talking about. When will I find that someone? And
Mhm.
and then when you just having "Where Were You" released, I've been seeing little things that have been posted up. I don't know if you run your socials for Earshot. I kind of get the impression that you do.
I
Um,
run a lot. Yeah. I'm on
yeah,
there a lot.
there was one that you posted up where it was you, and there's words popping up about mental breaks and breakdowns in general, or just this line of thought you're having in the video. And when I'm listening to "Where Were You," and I think I have it written in the question about how I feel like you went through something where you felt really alone, kind of maybe a little bit betrayed, and maybe who you thought was in your corner wasn't in your corner. And so you were left asking, well, where were you, throughout the song? And I also really related to that. So where I'm going with this is with this record, just from that song alone, was it a real kind of healing process writing these songs, cathartic for you, and kind of a rediscovery of parts of yourself in
Mm.
any kind of way?
It always is. And, music has always been my personal vehicle for getting through things. And that's
Uh-huh.
what got me into music in the first place when I was, a little confused, teenage kid that didn't have a lot of friends, wasn't sure what I wanted to do in life, even though at 13, you're not really supposed to know, but I felt like I needed to know. And when I heard Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Motley Crue and Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, I went, that like listening to them made me feel okay about myself.
Hmm.
And that's when I decided that's what I want to do. And it what I also found along the way is that, as you're pointing out, is that it was therapeutic for me to work through, sort of let go. It's kind of like journaling. They say to journal so that you let go of things. Well, songwriting's similar. I mean, I'm using it in that same way. I'm journaling, I'm chronicling a an experience or a period of time that I'm going through, or even something that someone else is going through. But more often than not, it's me.
Uh-huh.
And I, I'm a big uh, personal development and growth guru. I do that also, um, in addition to doing music. So I'm way deep into that, and I almost was joking around with somebody like I feel like I could almost create like a subgenre of rock, and it's like therapy rock or I don't know what it would call, but because I'm talking about things that I'm going through, and people are listening to them and going, okay, it's not just me. He's doing it too. But the thing is, if you really listen, at least it's my hope anyway. Like for the example with Where Were You, which as you pointed out is, when you're listening to the verses, you get that feeling, abandonment, betrayal, um, someone that you thought you were close to, you weren't as close as you thought. And that's all there. But really, the chorus is all about moving beyond that and realizing that none of those things matter. It's just they're just, and I'll use the word that I used in the line. They're just burdens. That's
Burden
all it
on the
is. You're okay. You're fine. It's just it's what I read in a quote many years back. It's stinking thinking. That's what it is, and I'm guilty of that. I can overthink with the best of them. Um, but that's what that song's about. I don't write to for people to hear it and go, ah, we're all fucked. Jeez. If he feels like I, if you really dig in, mm, I'm s- putting the solution to whatever, I'm talking about is in there, or at least the mindset, to get through it. And that's really more important to me than, people listening to my story is, what did you do to get through it that can help me get through what I'm going through?
line.
That's really the goal for me.
I mean, I think you nail it probably more than you think you do, with your music and the connections it makes with people. And I'm sure you've, throughout your career, when you go play shows with Earshot, whether it's present day versus back in the day, you know, you've probably been told by fans how a song helped them through something. So I think you're onto something there as far as I also want to call it like monk metal or like goo metal or something like that. And, this like new subgenre of just like this kind of meditative type music. It's heavy, but it's got a reason in all kinds of ways for being what it is for people. Like it sounds real dark, but like you're saying, what you're kind of wanting people to take away is that you will get through it. And so you saying that kind of has it in my mind that what I should expect from this record is there might be some darkness there, but the point is things turn out okay in the end, maybe. I don't know if I'm onto something with that since I only ever hearing one song, but if I follow your train of thought with kind of how you write, I wonder if I could be kind of right with that. But
Yeah, I mean, the solution is to not have the solution, right? Because it's different for everybody. What works for me may not exactly work for somebody else. So, but what I do know is that in the end, um, things can be okay. Of course, that involves what choices and decisions that we make along the way. Um, but by and large, when we're in that space, or we're just in a shitty mood and maybe having a shitty outlook, and we're having and some listen, that can go on for 5 minutes, could go on for an hour, could go on for a day, can go on for days, weeks. I've There's been months, where it's happened where I'm just in a space. And, something that somebody said to me a while back was, Will, you can look forward to things being better one day. And I went, hmm, that's an interesting idea. Like, I didn't tell me how, when, or how long it was going to be, but eventually, you can at least look forward to that. And it's true. So I do that often when I'm when I catch myself in those places. Like, I can look forward, I remind myself, to not feeling how I'm feeling right now and not being in this situation that I don't like being in, that's uncomfortable. It's going to change eventually. And so I look forward to that instead of just being hyper focused in the shit. And so I try to write things that about topics people can relate to because I think, at least for me, like as I said before, when I hear that somebody else is experiencing something, then I feel less bad about it happening for me. Like, oh, okay. And there's just like a relief, a weird relief of sorts that I get out of that. So, and I think that's what all art does. I think that's what you know, separates great art from amazing art. I think, really amazing art, and there's a lot of great art out there, a lot of great artists. Um, one second.
No worries.
There's a lot of great artists out there, but amazing, the stuff that literally can transport you and change your life, and inspire you to change your life. Um, that requires, a commitment to being 120% vulnerable and putting yourself out there, talking about things that you're going through that people go, no, you go through that? No, come on. Did I hear that? You're upset about a relationship. Well, you can go out and get another one. Yeah, but that's people's perception, and like you pointed out earlier, we're people just like everybody else, and none of that really matters. We're still human. So it requires, having a vulnerability to be able to talk about those things, to be able to create that kind of art. And so that sometimes is a challenge for me because I'm a very private person.
Uh,
Um, however, um, there's the other side, which we talked about a minute ago, where by the same edge of the sword. It's very therapeutic for me.
yeah, I could imagine. It's uh, my wife actually is kind of like that in the sense of she likes to be very private. She doesn't like having attention, feeling vulnerable in that kind of sense. But I think I would assume that she's found that when she lets herself be that sometimes that she feels good after the fact that she allowed herself to kind of experience it and then she found something positive from it. I get that way myself. I can be, pretty uh, isolate myself in my head a lot of the time. Went through a lot of shit when I was a kid. And I like to think that I'm through a lot of that muck now. And music has been. I've always wanted to play music, never have. I had a guitar at one point, couldn't learn it, so I gave up, which is the story of many, I'm sure, that try to take up an instrument and it didn't have a click. But music, um, music has been my vehicle in another sense that's not exactly like it has been for you, but similar is how vital it is for me. But I hear what you're saying about being private and then feeling good about with what you do, getting it out though, and then find yourself like, oh, I feel better now having done this. Put this song out there, um, and it leads me to what I want to ask you about. Where were you? The general reception of it, like, has the reception been good with the song? Do you feel validated about putting it out? Has it been good?
Yeah, our numbers have been good for listen, for a band that hasn't put anything out in over 10 years, hasn't really done any touring to speak of, to just plop a song out there, and announce a full length album. Numbers are great. I mean, YouTube, I think in the first month we're sitting at 40 or 45,000 views, tons of comments on it. Facebook, Instagram, all the socials, the views are, I mean, they're we're not keeping up on pace with, the bigger bands at this point, but we didn't expect that going in. It takes time to build, but the good news is we're not that far behind. So it just means that we just got to keep at it. We got some shows coming up, that we're going to do this year on and off. We're not going to do any of the heavy touring until next year. The record will come out in the fall. But in the meantime, we're going to put out probably 3 or 4 more songs from the album between now and when the record comes out in the fall. So it's not like it's going to be a complete wait, until the full length comes out. So the response has been good, but there's a lot of work to be done still. And there's a lot of, as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of fans that went into hibernation mode. And so we're in the process of trying to wake them back up again, and also, you know, gain new fans that have never heard us before. And we've gotten a lot of those as well. We've gotten a lot of messages, a lot of comments from people that never heard of us before. People that, you know, we got introduced to by the algorithms, so so far so good. We're not, it's not I wouldn't call it a victory yet, but I don't think it really ever is in that regard. The victory really is that we actually made and finished and completed a record
Yeah,
that we love, and that's the victory.
I agree. Have the shows that you've played recently been going over the same? Reception been good, good turnouts and all that.
So these shows coming up will be the first shows that we've done since we did the little 3-week stint in 2023 in the fall. Those shows, some of them were good, some of them were just not good. Again, we're battling, people not being aware, and of course, that's what happened when we got home from that. Well, we didn't know you guys were, come to Dallas when we were
Yeah,
just there. Well, we didn't know it. So I mean, it's tough, and it's tough to get to break through all that social media noise, to let people know. But it's part of the process. And listen, I remember when we were recording two in Chicago with Johnny K. Um, we went out one night. We were walking around downtown, and there's the Double Door, which we've played several times. A lot of bands have played there. It's a popular club in Chicago, and we looked up on the marquee to see who was playing there to see if we'd be interested in going there, but there was no name on it. But it was open. So we walked in there, and what we walked into was about 15, 20 people. And it was a big, holds about 700 people. There may be 20, 25 people, and it was Papa Roach. And we were
whoa,
like, shit, what happened? And now this was between, their big song, with
wow,
Last Resort.
yeah,
And then remember they had a couple years there where they just kind of, I don't know if they disappeared, but they weren't on the radio as much as they were. And I remember Johnny K and myself just going, Jesus, like what happened? And I think it was either a weekend or it was a Thursday or something, I remember. But um I just remember thinking, wow, like I love Papa Roach. Like if I had known that they were playing, I would have went to the show, but I didn't even know they were playing. And apparently a lot of other people didn't know. Now, I think it was about a year later was when they came out with Getting Away with Murder, which was their first big single back after years of just a dry spell where nobody cared. And now look at them. So when you go away like that for a minute, those are some of the growing pains that you have to expect. And it's tough. It's tough to get through, those moments of, well, this isn't where we left off. And so what's this? And that's I've always had especially now that we're kind of going through that same thing, I have a lot of respect. Not that I didn't before, but I have even more respect for those guys because now I understand what they were going through. I mean, they were arguably, a lot bigger than we were, and they were able to set aside, their ego and do what they love doing. No matter how many people came in, they stuck with it and stayed with it. And I mean, they've built back, I would say, even better
A
than they
thousandfold.
were before, that. So, it's stuff like that that's inspiring. And I think, you know, Jacoby, I would say, is the epitome of, and the rest of the band are the epitome of what I was talking about earlier, by being inspiring to people, going against the odds and really being passionate about what you're doing and staying with that.
I couldn't agree more. I really respect the guys in Papa Roach myself. Just their ethic and their passion, their drive, and just the way they handle things. I think is exactly why and how they've been able to survive and get to the heights that they reached. You know, they're massive. They've inspired and influenced countless bands that are up and coming now, and some that are even fairly established now that have cited them as been being influenced upon them or mentors of some kind of way. And then talk about Earshot for this year. You've been touching on it pretty much throughout this entire talk, but as a more definitive answer for 2025, aside from the album dropping, what's your hope for Earshot and the short term, and then the little bit more of the long term? Have you had a lot of thought about that? Are you really concerning yourself a lot with what's over the hill, so to speak, or are you focusing more on now for Earshot and then taking it a day at a time for what may come?
Yeah, we're definitely in take it a day at a time mode. I mean, you know, we obviously want to keep making great music that people connect with and can relate to. We love being out on the road and meeting people and connecting with them at that level. Um, we've come to the realization that this is what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I pointed out earlier, I've done a lot of different things in that break, but this is what we do. At the end of the day, we're musicians. This is what we're really good at in this world doing, and we can do a lot of great things with the talent that we were gifted with and blessed with. So that's what we're doing, and it's an interesting question though, because as I'm answering that question, I'm trying to think of a nice big goal that I could say that we're doing it for this, but we're already doing that. We're making music that we care about, that we pour a lot of ourselves into, and beyond that, um, our only hope is that people find as much value in it as we do, and that it helps them in some way, the way that it's helped us. And so, in that regard, we're already doing that. How far, how much more of it at what frequency, really will depend on how many fans stay with us and come along with us along for the ride. And but even at that, we would still be making music regardless of that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we do. Is what we love to do.
I love that last bit of how you answered that. It's good for me to hear stuff like that because I've always got that sense about Earshot in the first place with the members that used to be in the band and then present day. You do what you do because you love it, and it wouldn't really be too much of a thing if it was 20 people coming to a show or 10,000 people being at a show. You're making music because you love making that music. You love getting it out to people. And that's the point of it all to me in my head. I've always said that if it was me, I would hope I would be making it for that reason too. I wouldn't be concerned about what my bank account looks like, how big my name is out in the industry, because it's about the music first and how it makes me feel and what it does for me, and then seeing what it does for the people that listen to it, that consume it, that take it in, that kind of dissect it or whatever. And for me personally, just to you, that's always been what Earshot has been to me. This band that I turn to that write really human music, and just in general, your voice, man, it's such a powerful instrument, and the way you use it and how you write, and that's the biggest thing for Earshot that drew me to the music. On top of how it makes me feel, has always been you. So I've always had a lot of admiration and respect for how you do what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
I don't think I'm alone there in saying that about you. And just if any of the guys that used to be in Earshot watch this, hear it, same to you guys. I respect you. I love what you did with when you were with Will. All of it is been just phenomenal in my mind. And kind of to start wrapping this up, I like to kind of steer the question into the industry itself. Since you've been doing this for a while and you've been on different sides of the industry, is there anything that you've noticed that music needs present day, like more of or less of?
Well, it's funny. I've been talking to a handful of people about this recently in the world of rock, and I'm not sure what happens in the world of pop and
Uh,
all these other genres, but in the world of rock, what there really needs to be a lot more of, and there's a big need for it, is artist development.
mhm.
There's like I hear a lot of bands, and where I hear a lot of potential, they just need somebody to give them a little bit of guidance and a little bit
Yeah,
of push, to figure out the things. It's like the old saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? So someone to help show them what they don't know so that they can start doing the things that they don't know that they can do. And there's not a lot of that. Labels used to do that once upon a time, and now they don't do that because rock music, you know, uh, monetarily speaking, for a record label, they don't really make any money off rock
yeah,
music. It's
yeah,
all pop and country and hip hop where they make their money. So rock bands are typically an investment that they just don't like taking anymore. And so they either find rock bands that have it together, that's turnkey for them, like moving into a house that's already furnished. They think they'll be happy, and then they'll take chances on that. But some of the there have been some really big bands that became icons through artist development.
mhm,
Um, I mean, so many. I mean, Soundgarden didn't sound like Soundgarden on their first record. They sounded completely different. You go back to their EP, but they developed a label, stuck with them, developed them, and they found themselves after a while. Um, that's what I see, and a lot of other people see a lack of. I think what we need less of is um, there are a lot of records that are starting. I'm talking about the production style, the sound of records. They're all starting to sound exactly the same, and
yeah,
that's the only thing that as a fan, not even as a artist or musician, as a fan, it it bums me out that sometimes I can't tell one band from the next.
yeah,
Like I should be able
all
to
the
do
time.
that. And there's a lot of great bands out there, I think. I mean, there's a lot of bands that I do enjoy, a lot of newer bands that I enjoy as well, but it's just really hard to differentiate. It's getting hard to differentiate because there's a lack of, I feel like, finding that identity, like for example, like if you put on an Alice in Chains song, I know it is. The second
Yeah,
Lane Staley opens his mouth, I know it's him. Or uh if I hear a guitar from AC/DC, I know it's AC just by the sound of it. Like all of these things have something unique about them. And then, there's bands like Nickelback, for example. They've got some great songs. I don't know if, it's up for debate whether people consider them iconic or not, but they have their own style. They borrow sounds from different places. You can hear a lot of their influences, but that also makes them great
yeah,
in my book, and it gives them an identity. Um, you know, if I hear a really slappy low tune bass, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Corn. You can't mistake it.
yeah.
Just can't mistake it, right? Or if I hear David Draymond's voice,
You know it's
I
him.
know
You know
by
it's
him
Disturbed.
and Donegan's guitar, like I know
Yeah,
this is Disturbed, like, and that's what I'm talking about. There's I feel like a lot of some of the newer stuff is, I just wish they were more differentiated in that regard. But the songs are great, and I love the energy, and I love the spirit that a lot of these newer bands are bringing to the table, and I love the vulnerability that they're showing as well. So there are a lot of good things that are happening with it too. I'm just being nitpicky,
yeah.
about
Well,
what I wish there were less of.
yeah. Well, I actually echo that almost completely. And you basically covered it. Another side of that is stronger songwriting, too. I think in a lot of genres, I think there could be stronger songwriting, less of songs winning Grammys that are repeating the same three lines all throughout it with a looping rhythm or beat, and those winning like Song of the Year awards, or just purely from popularity or their numbers on streaming or whatever. A lot of that stuff comes from really talented artists. I don't discredit their talent or anything, but I agree with you. I think I really want to see a return to more originality, more development, like you're saying, would be a big, big thing to come back into music on all kinds of genres. Because I think all genres suffer from what you're talking about. I mean, how many Bring Me the Horizons do I hear in a day? Quite a bit. There's a lot of
Mhm.
people that they've inspired and influenced. And it's good that they influenced people to inspire them to start a band. That needs to be a thing and still be a thing. But I agree. And to wrap this up, because I want to get you on your way. Last two things, I want to just congratulate you on Where Were You being released. I personally think the song is massive. I love it, and I've seen a lot of what you're seeing, a lot of positive reception from the fans loving it. I mean, that riff gets stuck in your head that it starts with after that brief little intro, and just the drums just hit, and then when you hear You Come On, I mean, you're one of those bands that when you hear a song start, at least in my head, I know it's Earshot. I'm not going to say, oh, is that Tool? Which circles me back to what I said before we went live, is you've always gotten that comparison. You got it when you guys were starting out and you put out a record. You're like a Tool. People thought you kind of sounded like Maynard a bit. But
Yeah.
I've always thought you guys had your own identity. You sound like Earshot. You always have sounded like Earshot. You could pick out the Tool influence because I know you've cited Tool as being an influence for you personally, and it's there. But Earshot is Earshot, and I want to hear more of that with newer bands being less concerned about sounding like other bands that are bigger or the label that they're on, not telling them to sound like this because this is what's catching the ear. You know,
Yeah.
be you, be the music that you want to make, the music you want to hear being played. Be different, be bold, try things. You might ruffle feathers at your label if you have one, but it could pay off. And then, is there any chance that I could get a timeline for when you might announce the name of the record, because I don't think you have yet, and I'm not going to try and get the name from you. But when can we maybe expect to hear the actual name?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of out of my hands at the moment,
Okay.
but we're gonna announce probably something in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll probably, and maybe there's a chance it might even be sooner than that.
Okay.
Um, but we're just getting the artwork together for it now and getting it ready to push out there. We're looking at probably around the end of May ish. It'll come out. But yeah, we're super excited for the next single. This one's gonna be a pretty wild one. Compare, I mean,
I
you
like
know,
different.
where were you was heavy, the dredgy, and this one's a little. This one's this one's got some energy to it. It's uh, it's a nice song. It's one of my favorites.
Well, I'm excited, man. I am so excited. I love that there's going to be an album finally. Uh, I'm a patient guy, so I mean, I would have waited another 5 years if I had to. I always knew it was coming, and I'm just glad that it's coming as naturally and organically as it sounds like you're saying it's been coming throughout the process of making it. I think you got an incredible group of guys with you for this record, and I can't wait to see a show finally. Sounds like probably next year I might get my chance. And
Yeah,
I couldn't be more excited, man. And I just again, congratulations on where were you? Congratulations on getting a record completed, being in that place again. I'm sure it feels so good for you. And then just you know, I've said this so many times throughout this talk, how much I respect you, how much I admire you.
I
No,
appreciate that. Thank you.
I mean it wholeheartedly and genuinely. You've been a guy that, your music's just it's been a staple of my life since I heard you from the very first
Right
time. And
on.
it's meant a lot to me having this opportunity to get you on here and chat with you. And I mean that, completely. And I just want to say how grateful I am, and just again, thank you for taking the time. And I would love to do this again at some point, down the road.
Anytime.
Yeah, and just shoot the shit, I guess, again.
Hey,
So
thank you so much for all the kind words. Thank you so much,
yeah,
and thanks for hanging with us. That really means a lot too. So,
yeah,
um, much appreciated, and would love to come back on again.
yeah. I love hearing that, man. I had a bit of jitters because you're a big name to me, someone I really look up to and admire, like I said. So yeah, anytime, man. I will be in touch. I would love to write a review for the new song. I'd love to write a review for the record. More than happy to do that. I expect nothing in return. It's just something I'd love to do. And so if I could get that opportunity, I'm open to it, and I'd be more than happy. I'm going to get you on your way. Thank you again for coming on. This will be live on YouTube as soon as I hit end stream. You can do with it what you want. I'm going to be sharing the hell out of it. And
Right on.
enjoy the rest of your day, man. Grateful for your time.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, friend. We'll see you soon.
Right.
Peace.